This video will show you how to replace your front upper control arm bushings on a GMC Sierra 2500. This is part of your front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've done that, if you have a hubcap, we're going to remove that. That can be done using a 22mm socket. After that, we'll remove all 8 of our 22mm lug nuts as well, so we can remove the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, let's have a close look in the center area here. We have a metal cover. We're going to dislodge this so we can make our way behind to our axle nut. For this, I'm just using a small hammerable pry bar. I want to make my way in between this area so I can separate it. There's our cover. Just a quick inspection of that. We'll set it aside. We're using a 36mm for our axle nut. There's that. Once you have removed the nut and its washer, continue on with a hammer and punch directly in the center of the front axle. I've used some penetrant to help break this free. Now, once you do have movement from the axle in comparison to the wheel bearing, we'll continue on. Now, up along the top of the knuckle, this is where we can see our ABS wheel speed sensor wire from the wheel bearing, and this is leading all the way up across the top of the upper control arm, and you're going to find it makes its way behind the front wheel well. Up along the top of the frame is where you're going to find an electrical connector. We're going to carefully dislodge it, then we're going to have to separate the electrical connector from the frame and continue on down along this way. Now, as I make my way up and along the top of the frame here, I can feel where my electrical connector is. I'm just carefully pulling up on my locking tab and I'm pressing the wiring harness away. Of course, a quick inspection along each end for corrosion is extremely important. Continuing on, we're going to separate the connector from the frame next. Gently pry it up and out of the frame. Now, sometimes the mounting point will break off. That's okay. We can try to remove that or use a wire tie as necessary. As we make our way down, we have another mounting point. Pry that out of place as well. Let's continue making our way outward up along the top of the control arm. We have another mounting point. I'm just going to use a small flat blade screwdriver for this. The locking tab is inside of this area, so I'm using a small screwdriver. We're just going to make our way in, gently pry to separate that. Inspection of that. This is looking good. Now we're just going to pry this off of this metal bracket. Let's set this cable aside. Right in the same area, we're going to dislodge the bracket, which is part of our brake flex hose. We have a 10mm mounting bolt. Quick inspection of that. Just go ahead and remove your 10mm headed mounting bolt. Now this bolt is holding our flex hose bracket in place. We have plenty of slack from our brake flex hose. Let's pay attention to the upper ball joint mounting nut. We're using an 18mm. Go ahead and remove that and then start it back on a couple threads. Now you may find that as you're attempting to loosen this, it just seems to spin, and that's due to the fact that the stud for the ball joint might be spinning inside of your steering knuckle. If that is the case, you need to carefully press down on the upper control arm and ball joint, pressing them towards that steering knuckle. So for this, I'm using a long pry bar going underneath my frame and above my control arm. At this point, you would want to leave the nut in the loosened position, but still on a couple threads. After that, you'd want to carefully tap on the steering knuckle, causing vibration, and this should want to separate. We already know that mine does already want to separate. So I'm just going to go ahead and fully remove this mounting nut, and I can release pressure from my control arm. Still got slack on that flex hose. We're not going to cause any damage. We'll lift up on the control arm and rest this down and out of our way. With that knuckle separated and pulled away, let's have a look along the top of the control arm. We have our small plastic clip here. I'm just going to pry that out of place so we can transfer it over. Now with that out of position, we only have two more pieces of hardware holding it in position, one on either side of the control arm, but before removing those, we need to pay attention to the height of the control arm. What you're going to find is that the control arm isn't seated in the completely rested position. It's not all the way down. It's also not all the way up. This is the height that the brand new control arm will need to be in for the installation process. Make a clear marking in any way that you find necessary. I'm just going to use this crayon. I can see where this control arm makes its way over this way. So I'll just make a marking directly on my frame. Obviously, I have some dirt in this area. Now, while we're marking things, let's also pay attention to the alignment cams here. This is part of the bolts that we are removing, and we want to make a clear marking. Now, of course, once you are done this job, you will be getting an alignment, and the alignment professional is going to take care of this, but we want to have it as close as possible. If you were looking at these, typically you're going to find that you have a small tab that protrudes out and it goes through the alignment cam. On my particular application, I still have the original cap on here, so it's never had an alignment, but typically you could see that. So what I have to do is just make a marking in an area that I can see. I know that the top of this is right up along this area here. That's exactly where I'm going to be installing this. Make a marking there as well. For the removal of each of these, we want to make sure we're holding onto the bolt head side with a 21mm wrench. Now on the inboard side, we have a 21mm mounting nut. That's the side we're going to loosen from. This on here. With the mounting nut out of the way, let's go ahead and get this cam off of the bolt. You may have to tap it out of position. Now let's see if we can tap the bolt out of position. On the opposite side, if you do still have this plastic cover, let's just go ahead and pop that off of there. You can dispose of it. That's where you can see that small tab. We'll use some penetrant in this area. Now it is common for these bolts to be stuck in the control arm bushings deep inside this area. With that said, we're going to carefully start turning this one direction and the other. We want to try to get it to break free from that control arm bushing. 21mm, of course. So we are getting some movement here. This is what we're looking for. I'm going to start tapping this out of position. When doing so, we want to be extremely careful not to damage the threads on the bolt, assuming you are reusing these. Now that we did break this free, let's leave it in here. We'll continue on to the next piece of hardware on the other side. Just as with the other side, I do have a protective cover. This side off of here. Now, as you can tell, this side will only come out so far before it hits on the frame. Now we'll pause here. We're back at the front side. Fully remove that camber bolt. We'll tilt the control arm inboard. That's going to pivot this outward so we can remove that and the control arm. Of course, you would want to clean this and inspect it. We'll We'll set it aside. Now we're trying to slide the cam down the bolt far enough that we can slide this out of here. There's not going to be very much room. There's that one. Now after a quick inspection of this, we can start removing the bushings from the control arm. Now over on the bench, we're going to be removing our bushings from the front control arm. The process for one will be the exact same thing as the other. So let's go ahead and show you how to do one of these. To remove these, I typically like to use a ball joint press. We want to make sure that the bushing will get pressed out and away from the control arm. It doesn't get pressed inboard except for during the installation process. To remove it, it gets pressed outward. So with that said, we need to have an adapter that fits around the outside of the bushing and up against the control arm only. Let's just have a quick look at our new bushing. We have our adapter. I would go right over it. Now, of course, on the other side, we will have to have something that can go up against the bushing and drive it through the control arm into that cup. Let's get everything set up here. I'm going to be pressing up against this side with my press. Now I've got my adapter. Slide it right into my ball joint press. At this point, we need something to press up against on the far side here, so we'll just get everything in position. Line it up so it's as straight as possible, and we're going to start applying pressure. Once again, we're driving the bushing from in the control arm out and away, not towards the center. Remove our ball joint press, any of our tools, and our bushing. There it is, friend. Prior to installation of any brand new part, we want to make sure we clean and inspect our mounting area. We have a circular port here and on the inboard side. Go ahead and clean those up. I can use a wire brush, you can use sandpaper, whatever's easiest for you. After cleaning inside of the circular ports, you also want to make sure that you clean the flat surfaces as well. Prior to installing our brand new bushing, we'll just use a little bit of copper anti-seize inside of the circular ports. You don't need very much. And now it's time for installation of our brand new upper control arm bushing. We'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation. We have this flat flanged area that comes through from the outside towards the inboard side. Should generally slide right in until you get to the inboard side. Now continuing on, when we go to press this, we can only press up against the metal ring along the outboard side here. We do not want to press against the center. That's only going to force the rubber and could potentially damage it. So we have an adapter that fits right along this. On the other side, we have to pay attention here as well. The bushing will protrude out a little bit past this, so we need to have a small cup that makes its way out around there. I have an adapter, slides right over it. And of course, something to press up against. While holding everything together, we'll continue on with the ball joint press. We're going to be pressing the bushing from the outboard side towards the inboard side. Let's get our ball joint press in position here. We'll make sure everything's centered as well as possible. And now we'll start pressing it in. Just be aware of any pinch points as you continue on. This is looking good. The next thing we need to do is double check all the way around on that bushing compared to the control arm, confirming it's properly secured in place. Once you've done that, go ahead and repeat the process on the other side, and we can install our control arm. Now, prior to installation of any brand new part, of course, we're going to make sure we clean and inspect our mounting areas. We have both areas on the frame. We're going to use a wire brush. We'll clean these up. Keep in mind, we want to make sure we still have our markings in the proper areas. Now, if you're not planning on replacing the hardware, you want to make sure you clean up the hardware and give it a thorough inspection. I am going to be replacing mine. Either way, once you have it cleaned, we want to make sure we apply some anti-seize. To prepare these for installation, we're going to apply some copper anti-seize to the smooth portion. Now it's time to install our control arm. We're sliding this in towards being in the proper position. We're starting with the rearward bolt. As far as this, we want to make sure we have the cam approximately halfway down. We're going to carefully slide this into position. Make any adjustments as necessary here. We can see that this did slide through as it needs to. Let's go ahead and make our way to the front side. We're going to install that piece of hardware as well. Let's get this on here. Install that mounting nut. Same process for the rearward side. Both pieces of hardware are started in position. We want to make sure that the cams are in the right order here. So what we need to do is make sure we can see that small tab protruding through the cam there. Continuing on, we'll make sure we have the proper height adjustment during the removal process. I had mentioned we want to make sure we're in the same positioning. I'm just going to use a small block of wood. We'll get this in here. Now we can pay attention to the cams themselves. We made clear markings. We want to make sure that everything's aligned. You can push this one direction or the other, and you can see that the cams will pivot. You can also move it by pivoting the cam itself. We want to do that with the bolt head side. Once you have it in the proper positioning, tighten the mounting nut side. The torque for each of these will be 140 foot-pounds. We'll just double check to make sure we have the proper adjustment here. We'll make our way to the other side. Double check our alignment here. Just go ahead and get that nut off of there. So now what we need to do is make sure that we have our brake flex hose in the proper orientation. This bracket here will need to go up and above our steering knuckle. You don't want to have it underneath close to the axle. Aside from that, when we start bringing the steering knuckle up, we want to make sure that our axle is going through the backside of our wheel bearing and out through the outside of the wheel bearing. Let's start bringing this up, and we'll align the ball joint as well. You may find you have to adjust the control arm in one direction or the other. Since I'm going down, I'm just going to lightly pry here. We have our ball joint mounting nut. Start that in on the bottom. Just double check to make sure that your brake flex hose is in the proper positioning. As I mentioned, it needs to go up and over the knuckle, not underneath. The mounting nut started on. Let's go ahead and bottom it out. The torque for that will be 37 foot-pounds. A quick note about this, if you found that the ball joint stud was spinning on you when you were trying to tighten this, you could use a pry bar and pull down on the control arm. Pressing that stud down into the knuckle, that should hold it still for you. Let's pay attention to our brake flex hose next. Up along the top of the steering knuckle, you can tell that the brake flex hose bracket has a small alignment tab, and then of course we have a port on the knuckle and on that bracket for our mounting bolt. Now we have our brake flex hose. The bracket comes underneath our upper control arm, along the inboard side and up along the top. We'll align the mounting bolt port for this as well. Start that in and snug it up. It's time to secure that ABS wire next. We'll slide that into its locking clip. Make our way over here now. You can see exactly where it needs to fit into. Press that in. Let's make our way up and behind here next. As we make our way under here, there's going to be two mounting points for our ABS wire. You'll find that you have a small circular port here. That's for the first mounting point. It's just going to line up and slide right in. There we are. The next mounting point is going to be right up along the top. Obviously, from under here, it's fairly difficult to see. Generally, you can just feel around. You're going to find another circular port, line it up, and press that in. Let's get this connected. Press it in, listen for a click, double check to make sure it's secured so you do not get an ABS wheel speed sensor light. It's time for the axle nut. We'll start with our washer. Start on this axle nut. I'm going to use a pry bar. We'll come across the studs down towards the ground at an angle. That's going to prevent this from turning on us. Now when we tighten this axle nut, we have to do it by hand. You don't want to use an impact tool, which could cause damage to the bearing. We'll snug this up and then we'll torque it. I have it bottomed out, so I'm going to torque this to 188 foot-pounds. Once you have that axle nut torqued to specification, it's time for the protective cover. We'll tap this in place using a rubber mallet. Double check to make sure it's sealed all the way around. Now one last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our wheel. Now it's time to reinstall that wheel. Once you have the wheel in place, start on all 8 of your 22mm lug nuts. We're going to lightly bottom them out. We'll get the wheel safely back down on the ground and then torque each of them to 140 foot-pounds. Now I've got the wheel back on the ground. Let's go ahead and torque each of these lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Torqued. If you have a center cover, install that now. We'll get this in place. We're using our 22mm socket to lightly bottom these out. Double check to make sure it's secured in place. Okay friend, we finished our installation. Now the next thing you want to do is take your vehicle for a road test. Make sure you have no ABS light and get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.